Hello and welcome back to my shop. Thanks for tuning in. Today we've got a fun little project to look at. This is a buffet table that a client asked me to make. She wanted it to match her dining room table and bench that I made her last year. But today's video, we're not going to really do the typical step-by-step how-to video. Really today we're going to focus on the mistakes that I've made in the past, the lessons I learned from those mistakes, and what did I do differently on this table to make this project really pain-free. If you do want to see a long form video on more of a how-to step-by-step, I'll leave a link in the description below for the matching table and bench that go with this buffet table. So let's get right into the build. First up, we're going to talk about building a form, or very specifically about the mold release portion of that form. I personally will never build another form again that I don't use tape. Now you might hear some people say you have to use Tyvek tape or house wrap tape. Let me give you a tip. The clear packaging tape that you can buy is the exact same thing. It does the exact same job for about half the cost. I did one time use a spray-on mold release, thought I'd push the easy button and make it easier on myself. That was a mistake. Here's what happened. So here I am spraying on this mold release thinking, this is so fast. Think of all the time that I'm gonna save. And then that's right, I had to grind the entire form off of my tabletop. That took quite a bit of time and made one hell of a mess out of my shop. That's a mistake I'll never make again. So what happens when you use the tape? Take a look. In this case, I'm just using an old shelf for a form, and I'm going to cover every square inch of it with packaging tape. This includes the 2x4s I use for the sides of my form. Everything gets taped. And when it comes time to strip the form, honestly, the most difficult part is breaking that caulk bead. Let's take just a minute now and talk about sanding. Everybody hates sanding. It's the worst. But how can we make it just a little bit less dreadful? Well, to start with, about a year ago, I purchased this 3M extract sander. It is, I'll admit, a bit pricey, but it's by far, hands down, the nicest, smoothest operating sander I have ever used. And despite having spent all the money on that sander, the truth is I'm really kind of a cheapskate at heart. So for the longest time, I have been buying these sanding discs from Amazon. They're just a standard disc. They're pretty cheap. I think, there can't be that much difference between these sanding discs and the more expensive ones. But I see everybody's videos they're posting about these 3M extract, these Cubitron sanding discs. And I think, well, maybe there's something to that. Maybe I should give it a shot. So I did. And what I discovered is that they're actually pretty great. So these discs cut down on my sanding time by, I'll bet, 30% or more. And they outlast these yellow discs by a long shot. Now, they do come at a cost though, but I don't really mean money when I say that. I believe that the time I save by using these discs versus these, and the fact that they just outlast them, I think that more than makes up for the added cost. The cost I'm referring to is that because these cut so aggressively, they do add a noticeable amount of vibration to the sander. Now, not unbearable, but definitely noticeable. But if goal number one is to cut down on sanding time and still have a great finish, these 3M sanding discs are really a great choice. Next, let's talk about pouring some epoxy. Or really, we're going to talk about what temperature to pour the epoxy at. If you read the instructions that come with the super clear deep pour epoxy, it's going to tell you 70 to 84 degrees is generally where you want to be, but that varies depending on the thickness of your pour. I'm going to tell you, if you're pouring 2.5 inches thick for a tabletop, 70 degrees is way too warm. The epoxy is going to cure too fast. And in fact, the first table I built, that's where I set my shop at 70 degrees. And take a look at what happened. Yep, that's exactly what you saw. Wrinkles in the epoxy because it cured too fast. Now luckily I had enough thickness there that I could flatten out the slab and it didn't cause me any issues in the end. However, we do want to slow down that cure process, not just to avoid the wrinkles, but we also want to allow any air bubbles the chance to escape out to the top. For this pour, I set my shop at 50 degrees and left it there for about 2 days. At 50 degrees, the epoxy basically doesn't cure at all, which gives all that time for the air bubbles to work their way out to the top. I then turned my temperature up to about 60 degrees for a couple more days, and then about 65 degrees for another week or so before I got back to actually flattening the slab. The epoxy cured nice and slow, it turned out with no bubbles, it worked perfectly. This does mean I probably won't be able to pour any epoxy tables in the summertime, but really I try to take on these projects in the wintertime anyways. So now let's take a look at some finishes. When it comes to finishing your tabletops, it seems like the options are almost endless. I personally have only used 2 different finishes on my epoxy tables, and I'll just kind of share with you the upsides and downsides to both. To start with, the Rubio Monocoat, I used this on the first table I built because it seems like that's a very popular finish to use amongst YouTubers, so I thought I'd give it a whirl. It does in fact work really well, it makes a beautiful finish, and it's very easy to use. Any novice can handle it, it's literally just a wipe-on finish. The downside to this is it doesn't hide anything. If there is a swirl mark in your epoxy of any kind, it's going to show. So make sure you're extra diligent when it comes to your sanding and try to get every swirl mark out of your epoxy. And just a quick look at how easy it is to apply Rubio Monocoat. We're just going to spread it out with a trowel and then buff it out with a rag. The other finish I like to use is called conversion varnish. This is a solvent-based finish that requires a hardener. Because this is solvent-based, it actually etches into the epoxy just a little bit, so it does an amazing job hiding and filling any swirl marks. Once you spray this over the epoxy, it's like looking through glass. It also dries really fast, so you can apply multiple coats in a day and get the job done. It's a very durable, high-build product, really only requires 2 coats to be a finished product. However, I usually spray 3 because I think it's just beautiful. The downsides to this, it is a spray finish only. You can't brush this on. The spraying is what causes the chemical reaction which causes this to harden. So you have to have a little bit more equipment. You're going to need a sprayer. You really should have some sort of spray booth and exhaust fan. And because it's solvent-based, it's pretty harsh. You're really going to need a respirator. This is first coat of conversion varnish on the underside of the buffet table. I highly suggest you don't cheap out on the table base and buy some cheap stuff online. These are made by a local guy, local to me anyways, at Wisco Metalworks. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check out his website. And here's a final look at the table. This customer wanted a flat sheen, and I personally love it. Let me know in the comments what you think. Well, that's what I have for you today. Thanks for watching till the end. Hopefully this was helpful for you. Hopefully you learned from some of my mistakes and your next project can go smooth and painless like this one did. If you found this video useful at all, I ask that you please like and subscribe. And really, as I always say, even if you didn't, please like and subscribe. We'll see you on the next one.